Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for joining us for this webinar hosted with the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce together with Maverick Research. I would now like to introduce our moderator for today's session. Dr. Albert Kwao Eliasin is a seasoned management professional with over 27 years of experience across business strategy, organizational leadership, sales, project management, and strategic marketing across Africa's private and developmental sectors. He has held senior leadership roles at Unilever in Ghana and Mozambique, the British Council, IFC World Bank, and DuPont Africa, leading impactful market entry, distribution, and brand innovation projects. Dr. Eliasin is managing partner at AE Insight IQ Research and Advisory, Director Africa at Sipwa Eliasin Global, and Managing Director of Oyster Merida Holdings. He is passionate about developing the emerging generation of business leaders and is also a full-time consultant, master trainer, and adjunct lecturer at leading institutions like CEIBS Ghana, Nova Business School, and the University of Ghana Business School. His teaching at these institutions spans business strategy, strategic marketing, management, entrepreneurship, public administration, and policy marketing. Albert holds a PhD from the University of Ghana, where his thesis on policy marketing earned the Vice Chancellor's Award for the most outstanding doctoral thesis in 2023. Albert also holds an MBA and multiple post-degree certifications. Thank you very much, and I'll now hand over to our moderator, Dr. Eliasin.
Thank you, Immaculata, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is going to be held under the theme, What Shoppers Expect, Price and Behavior Insights Amidst a Stronger Cedi. And this webinar, as has been indicated, is hosted by the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Maverick Research. My name is Albert Eliasin, and I'm honored to be your moderator for this session. I look forward to guiding you through this session, which I hope will be very engaging and insightful. But before we go on, we are all privy to yesterday's tragedy. Very, very unfortunate. And so I would crave your indulgence that we observe a minute silence to pray for the repose of the souls of the departed. If you don't mind, you join me in observing a minute silence for our dear but unfortunate brothers who passed away yesterday. So may the souls of our dear departed brothers, government officials, and all the faithful departed find rest in the bosom of the Lord. Amen. As you may also know, Ghana has recently experienced a significant appreciation of the cedi against all the major foreign currencies. Now, this economic development has sparked important conversations around pricing, issues of affordability, and consumer expectations. So you have a situation where businesses and consumers are watching closely to see how pricing strategies will adapt in this context. I, in my case, have some small side hustles, and I'm always looking around to see what are my suppliers doing in terms of pricing. My customers are asking me, what are you doing? The dollar has come down. What are you doing about your pricing? And these are questions that agitate a lot of businesses on a daily basis. So today we have with us Mr. Atomaika, who is the principal, the managing principal of Maverick Research. And he's going to present to us the findings of a comprehensive study that they conducted in June around these questions. Now, a bit about Maverick Research, and then I would dovetail that into introducing Ato. So Maverick Research has been a leading West African insights and advisory firm, which is known for its deep specialization in market measurement and consumer intelligence. And Ato, who has 25 years of experience spanning roles at Procter & Gamble, Kraft, Nielsen, Millward Brown, brings such a rare blend of global expertise and local insight. Now, under Ato's leadership, Maverick has achieved a lot of plaudits, becoming the first indigenous firm that serves as a retail audit on record for Unilever, Wilmar, GB Foods, and most of the other leading FMCGs in Ghana, and indeed in West Africa as well. Over some periods, the firm has delivered some impactful research across Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and Senegal. And in this quest, what they've done is that they've helped their clients to optimize pricing strategy, drive their route to market strategy, and ultimately unlock growth of their categories when consumer behaviors are shifting. So Ato, who is going to be our presenter today, currently leads Maverick's work on localizing global growth models and co-developing some measurement tools that are tailored to the realities of the African market. Now, the study that Maverick conducted surveyed shoppers in Accra, Kumasi, and Tamale. And the outcomes of this survey provides us with valuable data on consumer awareness, price sensitivity, and the expected changes in key sectors. And some of the sectors that they studied span electronics, fuel, building materials, and auto parts. So what we are here today to do is to try and understand how Ghanaian consumers are responding to a stronger Cedi, which in some quarters, they say is unprecedented. And in other quarters, they will say it's not sustainable, or let's wait and see. But essentially, what we want to do today with Ato is to explore Maverick's research, their latest data on these shifting price expectations and behaviors. And this is important because ultimately what we seek to do is to equip businesses with actionable insights so they can refine their pricing, their communication, and consumer or customer retention strategies. So this is an important endeavor that we are about to undertake today. Before I bring in Ato, a few housekeeping issues. First, kindly note that your microphone will be muted upon joining this webinar so that we can prevent any background noise and disrupt the speakers and other attendees. But if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand using the hand raise icon on your screen. And I would, depending on the circumstances, will give you permission to speak. But most importantly, if you have a question for the speaker, please we have a dedicated Q&A feature on your screen. Please use that, note down your question, and this will help me track and address your questions and pose them to Ato in a very structured manner. If in any circumstance you experience any technical difficulty, such as issues with your audio or your video, as the case may be, please also use the Q&A feature. I would entreat you to stay for the full session so that you can gain valuable information that will be shared throughout the session, including the Q&A segment. One important thing that you need to note is that this webinar is being recorded for future distribution, and we're also live on Facebook. So without wasting any more time, please join me in welcoming Ato to share the important insights from the research.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you to the UKGCC and the entire team for having us over to share this very important work that we've done. And as Doc said, I think issues around pricing, even with his side hustle, it gets a bit irritating, right? When customers are asking you that when am I going to see some price reduction, and you having challenges with how much you bought it for and how much you want to pass on, and doing all that that math that comes along with it.
Yeah.
But this afternoon, I'm going to take you through exactly what we set out to do, which is literally how can we empower clients and partners through this process. We know very well that the Ghanaian economy over the past 7 months, I would say, has gone through something that's been fairly unique, at least in recent times. And that is more driven by the fact that we've had the cedi appreciate. We've had fuel prices until the most recent fuel levy also come down. But even with that, we still have significant declines in the in fuel, as well as in the foreign exchange pricing, specifically against the US dollar, against the British pound, and the euro. So we set out to find out from Ghanaians, what's this all about? And the first thing we kind of did was, well, are you even aware? What's the level of awareness of this phenomenon? And not surprisingly, it was quite widely. Everyone pretty much was aware of it in some shape or form. And you usually get it from the usual sources, the traditional media sources from that standpoint. So the chart that I'm showing here on the left side shows the level of awareness of the cedi appreciation. On the right is the source of information. And one striking thing is how much social media is playing into the awareness and education around this pricing, the cedi appreciation, and the implications thereof, which to me makes it a point that, well, if you're looking at any kind of communication strategy around decreasing prices as manufacturers, or any kind of price signaling, social media should definitely be part of that. Definitely be part of that mix. We then, well, what are the expectations of prices of both foreign and local goods, right? Because we had to delineate that. Over 90% of respondents definitely expected some price relief on foreign goods. That's fairly understandable. And you had roughly about 78% who also saw that, well, local goods could also come down as a broader part of this strengthening of the cedi from that perspective. But more so is the fact that this is overwhelmingly for an import-based economy. This was quite striking in the fact that almost 90% level of awareness, 90% level of expectation to have some price relief as a result of the cedi appreciation from that perspective. We then looked at, well, which categories or which sectors were they expecting some price reduction from? Electronic and appliances came out tops, or were very high, was high on it on the left. You can see 77% had that. Fuel and petroleum products was the other that came in key. If we take a look at recent events in the marketplace, I'll say since July, electronic appliance and electronic players have kind of driven quite a number of sales to kind of respond to this. Fuel, we're all quite aware the benefits of the overall fuel reduction at the pumps that we're facing at this time. For FMCG, we have about 73% of consumers were looking at some reduction in prices or some relief on prices. In terms of cars and auto parts that came in right after FMCG, around 62%, and then clothing and building materials were further most distant. So if you look at it from that perspective, you have more of the everyday products as well as items that are perceived as heavily import dependent, driving these results. We then looked at, well, we are aware of this. We know that we expect products we're expecting some pricing relief, and we know which sectors we hope to see some price relief. The question is when and how, and by how much. So on the left part of the left chart is the expected time to which they expect, consumers are expecting, or Ghanaians are expecting, manufacturers, importers to pass on some pricing relief. The first, obviously, as we look at this, this was conducted in July, the survey. So looking at roughly around August, September, was roughly the timeline. So anywhere between majority, about 77%, was considered anywhere between 1 to 3 months for Ghanaians to see some pricing relief at shelf, right? So it wasn't the key thing was they're expecting it fairly sooner, within up to 3 months from the date of the study. We're looking at roughly August, September for us to can see some pricing relief on that. Very, very little, less than 10% where don't anticipate any pricing relief, which once again comes to the groundswell of what Ghanaians are looking for in terms of pricing relief at shelf. Now, by how much should importers, manufacturers, business owners look at pricing? If you look at the chart on the right-hand side, 43% talked about what matched the Cedi's appreciation, right? So we're talking in excess of 20-30% pricing reduction from that perspective. Reflect reduced import costs, which tend to be more around the 10% range, depending on the category. That gives us a fairly good set of markers to really engage on if we want to really look at it in that sense. It was those who thought that you need to reverse the inflationary spikes were minority. I mean, that's quite tough to do in any business setting for that matter. But the key point here is Ghanaians are looking for this, looking for some pricing relief in the first in about 3 months. So we're based on the study around August, September, and we're looking at it, find a fair split between a reduction that passes on reduced import costs, or matching the full Cedi appreciation, which doesn't necessarily favor manufacturers, importers, and the like. So it's definitely somewhere in between. I think the key thing here is obviously reemphasizes the fact that there's definitely the groundswell for some pricing relief, and somewhere in between that works mutually for businesses and also signal some price relief for consumers will be what would be. Now, the question then is, well, have we changed our shopping behavior as a result of expectations of or the Cedi appreciation? The question is not really. If you look at it, for the most part, is the same or has improved from that standpoint. Only 31% are delaying expenses as a result of that. Right now, there's a point in time whether when we do this in November, will it be the same? Time will tell. But as time goes on and things drag on, and if the Cedi maintains its hold, obviously these numbers will change. But as it is today, it's roughly about 31% that are holding on to purchases as a result of the price appreciation from that perspective. It behooves us to say that definitely the pricing increases that we've seen over the past 36 to 24 months have definitely changed how we get near shop, and what the key thing is that here is most switched brands or looked at other brands during that period. And in that same vein, if their favorite brands and the like offer pricing relief, it offers them the opportunity to relook at those brands again. And it kind of gives you the sense of, or the perception that this is, if you're an established brand looking to win back customers, to open land your brand with new consumers, etc., this is something worth considering in that sense. Looking at, in terms of how, obviously, as I said, to switch brands and looking at consideration based off of pricing relief, it's very overwhelming in that sense. Over 68% would look at, definitely consider these brands that they've switched away from. So there's definitely data that backs the fact that providing on relief or passing on some of the cost savings would get lapsed users, lapsed consumers back into your fold. The question then is, well, how do we, if they're going to consider you to make sure that you come back, what's the quantum, right? 50% if the pricing relief is significant. And what do we consider significant? We're looking at rates that matches down. I think this is pure price elasticity, right? So 40%, we're looking at how much bringing down prices to match the Cedi appreciation, which is on the high end. And another 40% was also looking, or change was looking at passing on the reduction in import costs from that perspective. Anywhere in between, and what makes sense to you, but you have literally 50% of Ghanaians would look at a brand or your brand if you definitely pass something that is they consider significant in that sense. 38% would look at it with any kind of price relief or price pass on. Combined, we're looking at about 88, which is also once again in line with the overwhelming number that are looking for some price relief as a result of this. How do we bring it all together, and what are the key takeaways for this, right? Definitely the Cedi appreciation has sparked optimism about the economy and the health of it. But consumers are still waiting to see tangible relief in their day-to-day lives, right? Similar to, apart from all the price increases that they've seen in the past. If you are to ask them, they look at it with cautious optimism, as I would say, because if you look at the verbatim, it's like in Ghana, prices only go up, they never come down from that perspective. And the question is, in this very unique scenario where we've had the Cedi appreciate by this much and held on for this much, will that phenomena still continue in that consideration? The spending behavior patterns that we've continued to see continuously indicates that definitely in terms of price points and affordability continues to be a challenge. And it's quite clear that Ghanaians are loyal to their pockets and how much disposable income that they have versus any brand or any piece of item that they have, right? And so the more responsive we are to this as manufacturers, as importers, as business people, the more goodwill and gains that will address the Ghanaian consumer reality, right? Overall, we love our favorite brands. We love the brands that we serve, that we prefer, but we've become more and more highly price sensitive, especially over the past 2 months. And if we look at the results that we saw, obviously, a high number who switched brands over the past 24 months or 24 to 36 months. But also an equal number, over 50% will relook at brands if the price change is significant. 38% would will have another look at their brands if there's any change at all in pricing relief. So these are the key things I want to leave you with, as from the research findings that we found, that there's definitely the groundswell. Ghanaians are looking for price relief. I don't want to use the word reduction, but I want to use the word pricing relief from that standpoint. The quantum of it is obviously one that every organization will need to do based off of what fits well within their P&L and their business strategy. But it behoves me to also say that it also creates a huge opportunity for anyone who can enter the category or enter their segment with a significant pricing reduction, because they would get the attention of Ghanaians, they will get the attention of consumers to give them a real good look. So thank you. And I'll hand it over to Doc for us to take the Q&A session.
Right. Ato, thank you very much for this brief insights into the research outcomes. So I note that the floor is open for questions and answers, but I know that we don't have any questions recorded yet. So I will start by, I see a raised hand, but please put your questions in the Q&A segment, and then for now, but if you insist on having your voice heard, I would allow you in a bit. But let me ask Ato quickly one question. When you were ending, you talked about the fact that consumers expect a price relief, but not a price reduction, or you're not advocating a price reduction. Can you kind of throw a bit more light on that?
Absolutely. When you say price reduction, the sentiment around price reduction is that the manufacturer or the business owner is losing, quote unquote. We are reducing prices. So the importer, the business owner is using. It sets off alarm bells. No, we're not reducing prices. If you think of your consumer or your business, if you think of your consumer, your customers as partners, providing them some relief makes it something where you factored the consumer need, the fact that we've literally gone through close to 150% inflation cumulatively over the past recent number of years for all these products. And there's an opportunity to give them some relief in terms of disposable income, in terms of helping them improve their lives. And I think if manufacturers see it in that context, humanize their consumers and their customers in that context, it makes the discussion much more palatable. It gives it the right mindset. And so I use the word pricing relief to make it a mutual process to help partners think through it from see it as an investment, see it as building goodwill, see it as building equity building, letting customers or your consumers know that, you know what, this company or this brand gets me. This company or this brand understands me.
Right. Thanks. I saw a hand up. Alexander, do you still want to ask a question? Is your hand still up?
Yes, thank you very much. I had actually put it in the Q&A. Did Ato's research touch on the demographics? I mean, the segments of the consumers, younger, elderly, women, men, and so forth and so on. If so, if you could share with us the results and what segments were affected most. Thank you.
Sure.
Right.
So for segments, we obviously the study was designed Accra, Kumasi, Accra, Kumasi, Tamale, from a segment from a demographic profile standpoint. It was interviews. We interviewed 18 to 55 primarily. The 18 to 55 demographic split was more in line with the population census demarcation, but I can definitely share the final all the demographic profile slide as the final follow up to all the attendees.
Right. I hope that addresses your question, Alex.
If so, and Alex,
Yeah.
to add, if the concern is, well, is it biased towards a certain demographic group? The reason why it wouldn't necessarily. Our look was who are the real active purchasers and in the economy, right? And we looked at it in the sense of that quantum and the active spenders in that sector.
Right. Right. Atwa, I was going to ask a question about the extent to which the research findings apply to your food or the FMCG sector. I note also that Erefua is asking, did consumers in your research mention retailers like Melcom, etc., who have been advertising lower pricing? Do these comms reach consumers? And I think you can tie it in with my question about the applicability of the research outcomes to the food sector and generally the FMCG sector.
Sure. So we did this research. We're in field late June to the first week. The second week of July. So that's the context by which the time frame window that this was done. The price reductions, etc., by Malcolm X and the like had not yet really hit those bit. But what I would say is consumers are looking for these notices and information around this because of the level of awareness and expectation of pricing relief. And so communication around these things will be something that should be well received given the numbers. And also if your channels, if they are communicating that on their social media handles, and what's also part of it is WhatsApp, etc., to also make sure that these things are passed on, because that's all part of the information sharing channels that they claim. So it's not necessarily putting it on the IG, but making it something that is shareable within that social media platform. If you look at the numbers, it's quite clear that the source of information, you have your traditional media aspects of it, which carries it, but the social, there's definitely a lot of discussion and a lot of passing around information around this particular issue within the social space. From that perspective. So I think those channels would definitely be helpful if Malcolm and the likes are doing it. I know for a fact that the electronic and appliances sectors or players are doing that very heavily. Hisense and the like fairly recently.
Right. Please keep your questions coming. I'm on the lookout for questions as they drop, so please keep them coming. But in the meantime, let me ask Ato another. The survey shows that 98% of consumers are aware of the Cedi's appreciation, and therefore they expect visible price changes. So what practical and transparent steps can businesses take to meet these heightened price expectations and do so effectively?
Sure. So the level of awareness is 90. And obviously the level of the expectation for that for foreign goods is 90. Practically, I think that it comes back to what I brought up. How do we offer relief, right? I think more as a manufacturer, as an importer, depending on your individual business parameters, there needs to, your consumers or your Ghanaians are expecting some form of relief in some way. The determination will be, do I stay in business? What is acceptable profit to me, and what's the kind of relief I can pass on, right? It comes back to reframing or relooking at it in terms of not a price reduction, but pricing relief. In my context, if you look at the percentage ranges, right, on the high end, you're talking 40% to match the Cedi appreciation, which, in my opinion, in some cases, I think it's obviously not realistic. But passing on some of the savings, to the level of changes in import costs, which is more in the single-digit 10% range, could be a starting point. At the same vein, we also know that where you offer significant discounts, 50% of Ghanaians will really take a look at your product, right? So if we synthesizing these 3 data points should give each one of us some sense of where we want to play, right? If I've lost a lot of volume, so I really want to reintroduce this brand back to my lapsed users, it's a different strategy that I'd approach. If I'm introducing the brand to a totally new set of consumers, it's a totally different set of tools that I would use to get their attention and kind of get them into the franchise.
Right. Okay.
I think Alex has his hand up.
Yes. There's a question. Before
Sure.
I take on Alex, there's a question from Erefua, who is asking, do you plan on repeating the study sometime in Q4 if the macroeconomics continue for the next few months? Because it will be interesting to see if spending changes towards Christmas. Can you address
Absolutely.
this?
So we are looking at this in October because there's the same thing we've gotten. So we had this debrief with our clients in July, and this was the same response from most of the senior leadership that engaged on this data for us to look at something in October. So we're looking at a run in October and share the results, have the results out in latest by the first week in November.
Right. Alexander, you want to come in again?
Yes, please. Right, from the manufacturer's perspective, particularly at the level of the associations and AGI for that matter, have come out to say severally that their members have reduced prices in response to the stability of the cedi.
Okay.
Whereas at the retail end, we haven't quite seen that reflecting much. So it seems there is a disconnect between the manufacturers and their distributors and the retailers. So I don't know why this is so. Could it be linked to perhaps the issue about maintaining the margins always? And as you yourself rightly said, that in Ghana we say prices increase, but they never decrease. So could this be probably the reason for this? Because the associations, the manufacturers always tell us that yes, they have reduced prices, and they have evidence to show. Whereas in the market itself, we don't see that reflecting that much. So what could be the reason for this? Please, if you can answer that. Yeah.
Thank you. So Ato, take it up.
Alex, this is a great question. I mean, I'm glad you asked this because price compliance in Ghana, and for that matter, in West Africa is always a headache, right? It's always a headache. Whether from the breweries and getting price compliance, the force of demand and supply, and all the like on ground actually drives this. I think those that have done this well, or at least have succeeded in getting price compliance when they reduce pricing, there's no hard and fast rule, but I'll basically call out a few things I have observed they do well. So there's broader communication at the consumer level that shows that, hey, we've taken down our prices and this is what you should expect within retail. So it takes away the pricing asymmetric situation in the marketplace, right? So if I know that this thing should now be it's 3 cedis, but I come to you, you're trying to sell it to me at 4 cedis, I'll go look for a place where I'll get it for 3 cedis. That tends to help a lot. The other bit is obviously working with where there's definitely the ground force to engage retailers and encourage them to sell at this suggested retail pricing will be key, right? Obviously, the law doesn't enable manufacturers to dictate pricing from that perspective, right? And so there needs to just be practices and things to encourage retailers, those in the marketplace, to actually comply from that perspective. But taking away communicating about the price increases widely is a start. Working your salesmen or the sales partners, working with the accounts that they call on to comply, and partnering with them are usually the key. If you leave it to the market itself, it's a very, very tough one to achieve harmoniously across the country.
Right.
And I think the more obvious and more pertinent industry that has that is the breweries, actually.
And the tussle between the Minister of Communications and DSTV also comes to mind. Absolutely. When you consider all the agitations behind the scenes that are driving consumer expectations. Well, DSTV is one, the upper end of the scale.
There are more to it.
Yes. There's a question from Ruby. I'm not too sure how to take this, because I think she takes the conversation to a much broader scope. She's asking what could have contributed to ShopRite leaving Ghana. You could look at it in a narrow scope, but you could also take the question broader. And I also note that I wouldn't say it's within the context of the recent Cedi appreciation, but you note that the South African retail brands somehow have left Ghana or are leaving Ghana. Would you want to touch light on this within the context of Ruby's question?
Yeah,
and
I mean, I live
that
in
we are
retail,
talking,
right? So
yes.
This is definitely something that's been topical in my world for the past couple of days. So I think there are two things at play here, right? So one is the fact that ShopRite itself has been retreating from African markets, at least for the past 5 years, right? So they left Nigeria, or they sold out to a local consortium in Nigeria and in other markets. I think 3 years ago was when they left Nigeria. So the broader, retreating from Ghana and Malawi with this recent announcement is not necessarily a something targeted specifically at Ghana, right? Mm-hmm. I think that there's a much more bigger strategy that they are playing as a group in play. Mm-hmm. However, you can't also discount some of the local challenges that it presents, right? Mm-hmm. When you have a good part of your assortment imported, and you have, the FX volatility, whether the cedi is appreciating or declining, then the job, it adds the whole dimension of treasury management to the retail job that you have to do.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily a fun thing for most retailers to do in that sense, right? And if probably
and
if they
looking at
it,
the range that they carry, it will be a
exactly,
nightmare for commercial managers in that sense.
absolutely. And so if I have investment option A, where maybe I can open 10 more stores in South Africa or some other,
More stable environment.
Versus have these shops in 5 shops or 6 shops in Ghana that I'm always at the whims and mercies of an FX and look at the returns. I'm sure that they all those things kind of factor into it from that perspective. So I wouldn't necessarily say one thing drove it, but at a corporate level, they've definitely been looking at the African markets with or the African investment with a very clear investment focused lens. Obviously, the local conditions and the volatility adds another challenging dimension to it, which always makes relooking at the investment, whether it's something they want to continue or not. Was it 2 days ago, I got a question from one of our key clients that is it because there are China malls sprouting all over? And too early to tell, right? Because they're 2 separate things in terms of what they carry, the assortment, the engagement bit for that matter. But I'll say this, the structure of the Ghanaian consumer market is also changing, right? To be one that is much more price sensitive and one that getting more and more at the discount level, right? And so these dynamics should not be lost on anyone that plays within that space, period.
Right. There is another question from an anonymous attendee. This person is asking, how would you advise businesses who are aware of the appreciation of the Cedi, but are concerned if a sharp switch is to occur? How do they hedge against this if they choose to offer relief to consumers? I'm not too sure. Do you get the thrust of the question? Yes. Do you get the thrust of the question?
Yeah, I think so. So the fear is they take down pricing and then the Cedi depreciates again, and then we are back to square one, and then they are caught holding the bag. If that's, at least that's how I'm interpreting the question. I think here's it. This is my take to it. We're in business to do right by our consumers and our customers. And so if we go by it that way, consumers will understand it. When price increases were being passed on, we went along with it. Now the environment or the conditions has improved. I think that obviously passing on that relief once again comes to the point of, well, we are in this together, right? So I think I wouldn't be necessarily see them as partners, see them in a collaborative manner. And that's why I'm pushing the word pricing relief, because if I see you as a partner, if it worsens, I can pass on the cost to you. If things get better, I'll share some with you, right? From that standpoint. But I think that you can't. So the other flip question, the other part to this question is, so what if another competitor comes with that aggressive pricing based off of the savings and passes it on to customers and takes away your volume? That's also a risk.
Yeah.
And that is actually more of an existential risk to manufacturers and importers that are holding the line than any other thing, in my opinion. the longer and longer this thing drags on, because think of it this way, you would have gone through whatever inventory of your inputs that you bought when the Cedi was at 17 cedis or 16 cedis, right? And now you're buying it at 10, and you still want to keep the pricing there, and you have another importer or manufacturer who buys it at 10 and prices it way much lower than where you are, gets the attention of your customers, gets them to try their product or switch to them, you know?
Right.
So the risk, it cuts both ways. You can't look at it in that way, right? What if somebody does that? And what do you have to lose to build equity, to build connection, to really share a very strong sentiment with your clients with some relief.
Yes, and there's the reputational undercurrents that
Absolutely
that organizations have to.
You're not a cheat.
Yes. Okay, Mauli has a question. Let me allow Mauli.
Hello, thank you very much. I was going to ask the inventory question, and then I realized that you just dropped it in from the raw materials perspective. But then let me attempt to put it on the finished product perspective, especially when it comes to the electronics, because it's if companies have, the electronics takes a longer time to be sold out, to go through. So now with the lot of inventory that is stuck with some producers or some retailers, I'm wondering how they are managing to reduce the prices so as to ensure that they can still allow the finished products to go to that's the first one. Then the second one has to do with the FMGCs, because they are the rate of change within their supply chain, to ensure that they can get they can get their supply chain profits right, so that their margins are not really, now, as you said early on, possibly the retailers may be enjoying more supply chain profits as compared to them. And how do they attempt to ensure that they can make the consumers aware, so that the consumers put the pressure on the retailers? So those are the questions. But great research. I will be very much interested in having a further conversation on this, because I'm also very interested in research of this sort. Thank you.
Sure. So Mauli, I think let me take the first one is within the electronic space. I think obviously the finished products, and these are relatively, depending on how you look at it, could have some high ticket items to it, right? TVs, fridges, and the like. I think what I've observed is two things at play here. You have Melcom running sales, you have Electroland or Electromat or Electroland running sales, and then Hisense obviously running sales. There's enough competition within that space that if you choose not to have some tactics to drive down your inventory and keep prices where they are, you'll probably be left out, right? If you look at it in the much longer scenario, you probably take forever to run through them, right? So I think there's definitely been a call within how much margin do we want to hold on to, and how much do you want to balance it, and balancing that with, let's get this inventory out and kind of average cost it down in terms of how much we hold and what we're looking to drive from that perspective. And I think that the discounting and push in that sector is one that I hope every other sector emulates. but it also depends on having competitive forces at work, right? That your competition is also trying to move inventory and looking at getting things turned over to the new pricing, the new finished goods, sorry, prices from that perspective, right? In that context. So I think more competition within that sector has been the key driver, and the players rationalizing that, listen, I'm not going to hold the line for this thing and get my full 17 whatever, but I'm going to cut my losses or cut my revenue, sorry, my margins, and just, turn inventory very quickly. With regards to the FMCG bit and price compliance, if I captured what you said fairly well. It depends on which sector, right? So you have some folks that have inventory out maybe 2 months. You have some that carry as much as 6 months, right? Was engaging with a client that they made a calculation as of last year to kind of literally almost do a full buyout of the year. And now that's a much bigger problem that they have, because they've pre-booked, they've paid, right? And the supply chain for their products, for their inputs, has a really fairly long lead time, right? And so if you're locked in that kind of stuff, there isn't really anything you can do. You have to seek savings elsewhere from that perspective, right? But I think for most players, the 3 to 5 month cycle should be enough to kind of cycle out of the high cost stuff inputs that they may have had during the 17, 16 cedis to a dollar era, right? And so it comes back to what I was saying, right? Like the call to say, listen, how much profit is good for us, and how much relief do we want to pass on to still be competitive? The flip side, they may not like, because the more longer they hold the line, they also create an opening for someone to bring in or to import or cut down their prices from that standpoint. And that's actually a much harder position to be in if you're forced to take down prices in response to where the market has already started going.
Right. Thanks, Ato. I don't see any questions from our guests. So let me ask, among the sectors that you studied, which sector showed the greatest gap between consumer price expectations and the actual price adjustments? And how should the businesses in these sectors then respond?
I think for me, I think by and large, if I look at what's happened since June, right, when we really started seeing the prices where electronic and appliances have responded. Fuel, obviously, we can see that, and it's all over. FMCG, which would be, and I'll put it in the broader umbrella of consumer goods, our everyday use products, that's mixed. And I think Alex alluded to one of the nagging issues around that, where manufacturers would have taken down prices, but that's not being reflected in retail. That's also a reality on that front, right? I think vehicle and the auto parts bit especially has been an interesting one, in the sense that there has not been significant or noticeable pricing declines or reductions or relief on that front, even though that is heavily import dependent.
And this cuts across OEMs and then the second-hand markets, right?
Yes. Right. And even worse with the second-hand markets, by the way.
Okay.
Because just the recent qualitative work that was done around magazine and Aboso Kain. This was as recent as a week and a half ago. Obviously showed basically prices going up or being the same from that standpoint. And that for me is where it's a little bit questionable as to how that would be able to carry along that much. Time will tell. Time will tell. But once again, it comes to competition, right? So if you have other players coming in and sourcing that opportunity, and bringing in the parts and selling it, 20% cheaper, then you're getting a Bosoka, and you better believe everybody will start rushing over there.
Right. The other question I had relates to the regional disparities. So given the regional variations in consumer expectations, say across Accra, Kumasi, and Tamale, how should retailers tailor their pricing and their communication to these distinct markets?
So, great question. So let me share some more light on it. I think Alex would also love this. So when I cut the data and slice it by age, there isn't really any age brackets. There isn't really any difference. Regionally, the differences are not statistically significant when it comes to price sensitivity. They are directionally higher in terms of price sensitivity, but not statistically significant on an aggregate basis. So what do I mean by that? Tamale is more price sensitive than Accra, right? And so their quest for relief, or the clamor for relief, is definitely much higher than Accra. If you look at obviously Kumasi comes in more of as a midpoint, but kind of close to Accra. Not really that in this case, in the expectation, not by much, right? But the directionally higher ones was more around sensitivity to obviously asking for more price relief in the north than it is in the south.
Right. And beyond pricing, what other value propositions should businesses focus on to retain customers during this period of economic change and for some economic uncertainty?
Yes. So thank you, Doc, especially for this question. Delivering value to customers or consumers is not always about the cost, right? During the post-pandemic era, and where there was a lot of what we call de-grammaging or down-weighting.
Yes.
Right. So there was a lot of.
Is that what is referred to as shrinkflation?
Shrinkflation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right. There was quite a significant, pretty much almost every brand, almost every category had some form of shrinkflation in some shape or form, right? Giving more product would be another way from that standpoint. I think.
So for the benefit of those who are not in consumer marketing, so I have a side hustle, which is a restaurant. So the portion of rice that I'll give you now reduces. So even though I have not reduced my price, increased my price, but the portion that I serve per that price unit now reduces. So you get a smaller ball of banku or kenke for the same price.
Yes. Right. And I think we saw that even with the prices of kenke, right? So we went from quickly went to 2 cedis, and then now it's 5 cedis. In some places you can't even get 5 cedis, right? So for that same ball, you could increase the volume of it, right? And that is, if you increase the volume of it, you communicate that, you engage consumers on that, on that bit. The other bit too is around more of some of these more affinity-driven things that whatever you used to do from a quality standpoint, right? So if we've taken out quality of, and this one I'll say specifically for food, that's where we saw that quite a bit, right? Where it has had some significant impact on the taste, whether they admit it or not. The volume data will show that, preference for their product before product formulation change and after has shown. I mean, and we see this in a whole range from ice creams to spreads meaning margarine, butter, and the like, right? And so depending, the question will be, why don't we reconstitute the formula to give it the rich taste that it used to be, that you're known for, if we can afford that, right? And so returning to value and providing that these two areas will be areas where one may want to explore, a business may want to explore in this scenario from that, in terms of providing relief, right? But it has to be consumer relevant for them to relook at the product.
Okay, and the research also suggests that it suggests a more engaged consumer base now. So what mistakes should businesses avoid when communicating their pricing decisions during such periods of macroeconomic change? Because you see, there's a general awareness about what is happening in the macroeconomy, but there's also the expectation on the business. Okay, and there are some nuances, as you've indicated, between the regions and between demographics, however slight. So, but bottom line is that we have a more engaged consumer, a more aware consumer driven by social media and so on and so forth. So what mistakes should businesses avoid in their communication relative to pricing decisions?
Yeah, so if you look at consumer sentiment data, the more and more disposable income shrinks, the more engaged consumers tend to become, because now they have to really watch how much they spend. Right? And so that's the key driver of that phenomena. Right? If things get better for me economically, a lot of things become passive purchases as opposed to something that's a bit more involved, an active, quote unquote, an active purchase in that context. Right? And so as we look at this, how we can impact the consumers or Ghanaians' disposable income and impact how we can fit into that spending pattern, and come back to the relief thing I'm talking about, the more relevant you can be. Now, obviously the regional dynamics will always be in play, and with the regional preferences, and so you tailor it to that in terms of the communication and engagement on that front, to tailor it to that. I don't know if I've answered your question directly.
Yeah, but it will help, for instance, if you narrowed it down, say, for businesses that import goods, how should they communicate the lag between the Cedi strength and the lower retail prices, so they avoid eroding the trust of their customers or loyalty, for that matter?
So good. So I'm importer A, right? The choice could be, I have product, maybe 1 month product sitting in my warehouse, 1 month inventory sitting in my warehouse. I have 3 months on the road. The 1 month inventory is at 17. The new one is at, let's say, 11. The new 3 months on the way, or when what's comes at 11. I cannot. So it's also a little bit of a tricky situation. If I communicate that there's decreases coming, there'll be a run. Basically, it then impacts my product coming down the line, right? And so what typically one should do, or what we'll do is, listen, if it's at 17, let's look at more of a graduated scale. If there's competitive activity, I'll move closer to do something. If there's no competitive activity, I'll look at other non-traditional, not necessarily price things. So if you buy the stove, or if you buy this, you get that kind of tactics just to move inventory and not lose a lot of money, right? And then pass on. Once I have custody of the new inventory at 11 cities, I then look at, well, this is how I'll adjust it from that perspective, right? In that sense. But the key thing is, whether you have inventory now, one needs to be cognizant of what's out there in the marketplace, or what competition is doing. Because right now, that's the existential threat. And somebody within that space doing something from China that is as good as yours and is selling it 40% cheaper.
Yeah. So this is where, for organizations, I would imagine that the customer facing functions, your marketing, sales, and so on, should be singing from the same hymn book with the commercial people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because if they have different pressure points and they don't find a way of harmonizing it, then you have disparity in the market.
Absolutely. I think the fact that for most commercial functions, it's always also a bit of a tension situation, right? So obviously marketing will signal these brand building things and equity building aspects of it. From a sales standpoint, if the pricing and those things are not landing on shelves the way it needs to, the challenges then even compounds, right? From that perspective. And so those challenges are real, but that's also why we have jobs, right? To look at ways to find a balance to it.
I don't see any questions. Please keep the questions coming. Keep the questions coming. Don't leave me to ask the questions. But I have another one. Looking ahead, what signals or indicators should businesses watch out for so they can stay proactive about consumer sentiment, especially, and therefore the pricing pressures that they will face?
So I think two things in terms of two indicators that I look out for, and one is at least on a quarterly basis, or a 6-month basis, look at what I call the S curve, right? Which is, I look at, for the category and for the various pricing tiers, what is the contribution of the various pricing tiers to the category? So let me explain it. Let's say I take tomato paste, right? Tomato paste, 40% of the volume of tomato paste in Ghana is priced below 5 cedis. The next 50% is priced below 10 cedis. So between above 5 cedis up to 10 cedis. And then the 10% is above, it's 10 cedis or more. Okay. It's always good to understand where the market is shifting in most categories. And so right now, very few markets are going up in terms of becoming more and more premium, or very few categories are becoming more premium. It's key to see at a category wise in terms of what the volumes are, where is the market shifting to, and to make sure that you are well positioned in that one. So for me, on a quarterly basis, that's what I'm keeping track of, and that's the around those level of engagement that I give. Like, hey, are your innovation pipelines along those lines? Are the things that you're looking at, the promos along those lines? Do you have SKUs in these segments of the market, because that is where quote unquote Ghana is going, not to where you're going. I mean, people can tell you, but what they're buying is where they're going, right? And so it's very important to look at it in that way, and it kind of plays back into this pricing discussion, right? Because where affordability now becomes everything since the pandemic, things have changed.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The other thing that I will look out for, and I look out for, is just good old competitor activity. Just good old competitor activity. It used to be 15 years ago, if you told me that McVitie's or Omo will not be the #1 player in their segment, I probably would have told you that you're a bad prophet.
Yes.
And I should stop attending your church.
Deliverance.
Exactly.
Go for deliverance, yes.
And I should stop attending your church. The question is, as the market is shifting, preference and whether park size, park type, all those things, now opportunities start developing within that structure, and people start kind of plugging in, right? What I call the S curve. So look at the various contribution at the various tiers. The second one is if we're losing market share, if you're growing below the category growth, good old competitor activity. And now there are quite a lot of them in almost every sector. A lot of them in every sector.
And a good indicator is look at the dominant consumer brands 10, 15 years ago, and what are the dominant consumer brands, even the names, the brand names you hear now versus what you used to hear are very, very different. Yes. Erufa wants to know, do we see a role for regional pricing given the price sensitivities by region? Do we see a role for regional pricing?
So here's my thing. From regional pricing, how do you drive compliance around that? Right? Because then you introduce the situation where you have an arbitrage situation if you don't take care. And then your customers that are to buy in Accra are now going to Kumasi to buy a product that you've tracked to Kumasi and come and sell it in Accra to get more margins, right? We have this situation with Nigeria gray products at the moment because of how our city has appreciated, and I've written extensively on that, right? You can literally buy a product on, I'll not mention any detergent product, buy a product on the shelf in Lagos and come and sell it here 4 times the price. Now, even with the city appreciation, I've not updated the P&L, but I'm sure that that will probably be 6 or however many 6x of that, right? So if we look internally and try to do that pricing, the only way that would work is if the difference in pricing is directly attributable to transportation or some other costs, that doesn't make sense for it to be moved out of that area, right? From that perspective, what most companies do is they would have more of a different price brand or different price SKU for those areas and take it. If you look at the assortment in Northern region, for the most part, and some of the brands, it's very different, right? So you would have Gino on the south, and you have Pomo in Kumasi and Brisket Farm, right? So different brands adopt those different strategies from that perspective. But one needs to be mindful of arbitrage and cannibalizing your own market if you're not too careful.
Yeah, and the practice for most FMCGs will be to find strategies to even out the cost of distribution relative to the different markets, so that they can have a uniform pricing across the country, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Luis wants to know, with the recent stabilization of the Cedi, how is this impacting the retail pricing strategies of grain importers? And what opportunities does this create for local manufacturers to gain a competitive advantage in the Ghanaian market?
It actually worsens their position because the primary market, and I'll speak for Ghana, the primary market for grain imports in Ghana is Nigeria. Right? So if you're talking popular, very popular, everyday FMCG products that comes in, it's mostly coming from Nigeria. And given anything that would come from there, given the strength of the Cedi, makes it way more profitable to buy it in Nigeria and come and sell it here from that perspective, right? Now, if it's obviously from the UK or the US, that's a different story. I think there's definitely some favorability, or makes it less of an attractive proposition in that sense. But for products that are manufactured in Nigeria and very common, very popular brand names and ones that can be easily moved, it's actually a headache for our local manufacturers or local industry.
Right. Thanks. Mauli has come back again, and he wants to know that in the research, did you control for income levels of the consumer?
So we didn't control for income levels, but we had it across both income levels and education levels from that perspective.
Okay. For the uninitiated, can you explain how this could have impacted the outcomes of the research?
Okay, so typically, if you're doing a research, just on a very simple basis, you want to make sure that either one is representative of the Ghanaian population, so in terms of the quotering is representative, and two, you don't have a statistically significantly more one group over the other, right? So whether you have people who earn 200,000 Ghana cedis a year versus those that earn 40,000 Ghana cedis a year, you want it to be relatively at par between all the income groups, so that one income group does not overshadow the total results that is presented.
Or conversely, what you also want to do in terms of this question is the extent to which income levels influences their expectations and so on, and their habits. Hafsa wants to know, for consumer segments who are not aware of the Cedi's appreciation, does that lack of awareness affect what they expect from brands and how goods are priced?
In terms of all the folks we spoke to, there was definitely some higher level of awareness that, the Cedi across versus dollar, right? And mind you, the level of awareness of this started maybe 3 years ago, right? When prices of items had to go up, and everybody was saying it's because of the dollar right? And so that groundwork, or that there was definitely a high level of historical context, if I'll put it that way, to it. Specifically, having looked at the data with that 10%, in terms of what their responses will be. but I doubt it would make it will be radically different.
Okay. Ato, based on your interactions and the survey data, what role do you think that digital platforms play in shaping consumer awareness and expectations about pricing, particularly during currency movements?
I think for me, it's more information symmetry, right? That because if consumers are aware of that this one is sold at 3 cedis, right? What digital platforms have brought is more a broader awareness and drive of pricing, right? So whether I'm coming to buy something, I can go on Jumia, or I can go on Malcolm, or I can go on any other Tonaton and kind of check to see what pricing option, how much comparables are selling at before I make that decision, right? And so digital platforms, in my opinion, and the benefit that brings is actually bringing more of price harmonization. I mean, that's a tall order, but definitely is driving us towards that goal, right? As opposed to when you don't really have it, then you have access to that level of pricing comparison information, and you have to just take whatever the store is selling, or you physically have to visit about 4 or 5, or in some cases 10 stores before you decide on what to buy, right? And I think if I look at shopper trends and shopper behavior, that's and what digital is doing, that's definitely been a huge plus. Pricing symmetry information.
Right. I think I may have missed this point, but in the research, consumers express some reservations that locally produced goods will reflect price reductions as much as imported goods. Is that the case?
Yes. So the expectation of
That's
locally
the case,
produced,
right?
yes, locally produced goods was not as high as foreign goods.
Okay. So what can domestic producers and retailers do to address the trust deficit and demonstrate value?
So I think it helps them. So it goes both ways, right? So they can maintain prices and enjoy some margins, right? But it also behooves them that you're still competing and you have customers that are looking for price relief, right? And so if you're smart, or if you want to do right by your consumers, you look for ways to provide more value to them, which may not necessarily be pricing. At least it gives them that flexibility to be able to do that. I don't know if you, Doc, I don't know if you caught the last bit of what...
I think we had a bit of a technical challenge. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What I was saying was what it offers local manufacturers is more flexibility, right?
Okay.
Given that the expectations are, no, it gives them more flexibility in that sense. One is obviously it can take margins for a while, but also given the fact that you have a consumer base that is looking for price relief, offers them the opportunity to even build equity, to build trust, to build, use pricing relief as a way to get more consumers and customers into their basket.
Okay. David has a very interesting question. He says, why then do traders jump to increase prices when the cedi loses value in the international market, but are reluctant to reduce when the cedi is doing well? I think you've addressed this in many forms, but specifically, he's asking it directly.
So that is, trust me, I think this is still an enigma, right? Because one would expect the forces of demand and supply to still work, but it goes beyond, David. It goes beyond consumer products, and it goes beyond spare parts, and it goes beyond some of these other sectors, right? One can say the same thing about interest rates at the bank, right? Where you have the reference rate much lower, you have the T-bills rate much lower, but we're still, the rate on loans are in the 30s from that perspective, right? I think specifically to that, I wish I had a simple answer. It beats me all the time. But the one that doesn't beat me is consumer choice, right? So if I know that if I come and buy it from you, it's 4 cedis, but I know that it's to be sold at 3 cedis, I'll look for where I can buy it at 3 cedis and go and buy there. And I think the more and more we drive to that point, we can see some change, right? But it's something that I question all the time. Even before this, Doc and I and Jocelyn were talking about the recent announcement that one transport union put out that they were going to take up pricing by 20%, right? Where did that come from? What's the justification? And Doc, you're talking about the analysis that you saw that 20% wasn't even fair, even if you do the D-levy that they were putting on. So there's a little bit of the phenomena that I still don't understand. And I think that's the honest truth.
Right. There's a bit of instability on the connection on my part. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. The research also noted a strong price sensitivity influencing brand loyalty. I think you indicated that 73% had switched brands recently, but also have a willingness to revert if prices drop. Is that it?
Yes, that's
so
accurate.
How can brands capitalize on this opportunity to regain their lost customers?
Yeah, and I think, excellent question. If you look at the brand funnel, and if you look at how, if you look at the funnel and you look at where your brand is, signaling to them that, hey, we've reduced our prices, we want you back, that definitely gets the attention, right? That we know for a fact that half of folks would actually reconsider or really look at the brand if there's some price reduction, what they call significant price reduction. 38% will look at it, will have another look if it's just any reduction from that perspective, right? And so the ways that brands can do that, obviously providing that relief will be key. If you're looking at your lapsed users, so you're doing something more targeted. If you're looking at bringing new users into the fold who've not really considered your brand because prices have been that high over the past 36 months, then something more broader based will be key.
Right. I think that's it for me. Let me check if there are questions. Any more questions? Do we have any questions? Any hands up? We have a few minutes to round up, but I would keep the portal open for some 3 minutes for further questions. Ato, any points that you may want to highlight or for the benefit of our participants?
Yes. So I think what we're seeing, the kind of environment that we're seeing is actually a landscape filled with opportunities, right? More so than the challenges, depending on how you look at it and the data that you use to guide. If you're in a business that has been challenged from a margin standpoint for a while, there's definitely the opportunity to look at, well, how do we bring back the base and how do we resuscitate our spending clients in the midst of changing market structure for our clients, right? The key thing is relief. Pricing relief absolutely is something that will resonate at this point in time. Maybe 8 months from now, that will not be. But where the Ghanaian consumer sits, and after sustained sustained inflations, that the inflationary driven price increases that they've had, relief gets the attention. Relief builds trust. Relief is something they're looking for. Relief is something that they want to reward brands and importers and manufacturers who literally offer that, right? And so we should see that as an investment more so than as a worry. I wouldn't say as a worry, more than as a headache, right? We should see this pricing relief as a strategic tool, as an investment to invest in the Ghanaian consumer and bring them along, on our individual brand or our business journey.
Right. So I don't see any hands up. I don't see any more questions. So I think at this point, thank you very much, Ato. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us today for this important discussion on shopper expectations and behaviors amidst Ghana's strengthening currency. So today we've learned that as Ghana's Cedi appreciates, consumers become increasingly engaged and attentive on how businesses respond. And we've looked at sectors like the electronics, fuel, building materials, and auto parts. And through the Q&A session, we've also looked at food and the FMCG sector. The insights shared today highlight the need for businesses to act with transparency. And that's one point that I picked up. It also requires businesses to be agile and understand the shifting consumer or customer values and expectations. So let me reiterate my deepest appreciation to Mr. Atumaika and the entire Maverick research team for sharing such valuable findings and perspectives. I also want to extend huge gratitude to Ajoba and the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce team for convening this interaction, this seminar, which is quite timely for businesses at this time. Now, as we wrap up, I encourage all of you to take forward these insights, whether it's refining your pricing strategies, strengthening consumer communications, or proactively monitoring consumer sentiment, because these are quite critical to the survival of the strength of the brand. So please stay tuned for some post-event articles and resources, which I'm sure will be shared by the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce team and the Maverick team as well. And please don't hesitate to reach out to the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce team if you like to access today's slides or for any further information. I'm sure the contact information will be put up for your observation shortly. So we also greatly appreciate your active participation and the questions, those of you who stayed throughout and those who joined midstream and so on and so forth. We appreciate your active participation and questions. So I'm not sure whether there will be some feedback survey that will be, but if that is shared on the screen as well, your input will be very invaluable to us. So on behalf of our organizers, on behalf of our speaker, on behalf of Maverick Research, thank you for being part of today's session. We wish you continued success in navigating this evolving market landscape. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you for attending.